My name is Jake Nissly. I am, as Lane said, the principal percussionist of the San Francisco Symphony. I'm also the director of the percussion department, head professor of percussion at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, and a professor at the Aspen Institute of Music in Colorado. So, we have a little bit of time here today. This is a little overwhelming to see all of you here. This is great. My background, real quick, I play in the symphony, so I play concerts 4 nights a week, 48 weeks out of the year at Davies Hall, downtown San Francisco. This is my 10th season as the principal percussionist there, which is hard to believe. I last did one of these in 2017 and also 2014. So it means a lot to me to be invited back to do this. Real quick, my background started, I grew up in Iowa, which is a long ways from here, and I marched drum corps this will be my 25th anniversary of being a 14-year-old marching the Colts in the summer of 1998. So I relate very much to what you all are doing in the world of pageantry here. I only marched corps that 1 year, but I also did drumline at Northwestern, where Lane Army was my drumline coach, my teacher there. So we go way back to there. I majored in both jazz and classical music at Northwestern. I have a master's degree from the Juilliard School in New York in classical percussion. As Lane said, I've been the principal percussionist of 3 major orchestras. I could bore you a little bit with that process a little bit later, tell you a little bit about what my job entails. We're about to take off on Monday for a 2-week tour of Europe. We're headed to Paris to play a concert every single night for the next 2 weeks. So my job involves a lot more than just xylophone and snare drum. It's a lot of logistics, a lot of stuff that I learned actually, the skills and the skill sets from my summer marching drum corps and my sort of work coming from this same background. So what I'm going to start with today is I'm going to play some snare drum for you all. I know you've all had a really healthy dose of pretty loud in your face for the last 7 or 8 hours. So I'm going to do a variety of things on the snare drum. I'm going to play some rudimental snare drum. I'm going to play some snare drum repertoire from the orchestral repertoire to give you an idea of the kinds of pieces that you would play for an audition for a symphony orchestra. For my audition for the principal percussionist of San Francisco Symphony, I think there were 275 applicants for the audition. They ended up inviting about 30 people to the audition to play. And some of the repertoire I'm going to play for you now, I'll talk about later, but I'll just give you an idea of, you'll hear it pretty quickly, of some of the rudimental application to some of the classical percussion that I play. A few other little things for you here to sort of run the gamut of what you might hear. So that was an etude by Joe Tompkins, sort of hybrid French-American rudimental playing. This is an etude by Jacques Delacluse, etude number 9. Probably a lot of you some of you who have played some of the etudes from this book. This is probably the most famous one and probably the most challenging one. So what I want you to listen for here as I play, the snare drum can be a melodic instrument. I know a lot of us, when we get our start, myself included, I was worried about faster, cleaner, louder, faster, cleaner, louder, over and over and over again. How fast can I get my paradiddles? How clean can I get my double strokes? That technique is obviously important to a certain end, but once you have that technique, I think the ultimate level that you want to tap into is being able to play things in a variety of ways, being able to play the snare drum in a way that is inviting to not only a bunch of drummers, but a room full of other musicians. When I audition for my jobs, I'm mostly playing for violinists and clarinetists and bass players and the piccolo player or whatever. There's not too many other percussionists in the orchestra, so I have to think a little more globally when I play. So I'm going to take some of that technique you heard in the first one here and apply it to this more classical etude. Okay, so for most non-percussionists, and even most of you who've never heard of that, I would bet most of you are sort of left, what was that? What exactly? I can't really follow that exactly. Yes, I agree. My goal when playing something like that is to sort of spoon feed that, not make it any harder than it needs to be, if that makes any sense. I'm trying to play with an overt sense of phrasing and not only worried about, of course I want to play within the constructs of great time, great rhythm, clean rolls, everything, but also I want to sort of try to, again, make it accessible, make it enjoyable for more than just drummers, if that makes any sense. So you're probably scratching your head, how do I get here? How does one get to this level? Growing up in Iowa, 20 years ago, compared to you guys, there were not as many resources available. I didn't have YouTube to watch DCI individuals or the marimba solo that I'm learning, or a bunch of people play this on the recital, for instance, right? I think that you all have a great advantage, but also maybe sometimes a disadvantage in sort of hearing things one way and just trying to copy it. I think where I came from and where, what I want to impart to you all today is that there's a lot of really talented musicians out there. I met a lot of them at places like Juilliard. I meet a lot of them who come and audition for me now at school. All of you, no matter what discipline you choose, it's about consistent hard work. At the end of the day, to win an orchestra audition, there are a lot of very talented musicians. I do not by any means consider myself any more or less necessarily than a lot of these qualified candidates, but I worked in a way that I can trace back to my time doing this activity that you're all doing, learning how to do things repetitively, learning how to work until it's absolutely at that highest level. And I'm sure all of you today, you have your one shot to perform. You want to play at peak performance in that moment that counts. You can imagine the amount of stress. You walk on stage at Davies Hall, San Francisco Symphony, my life could change in the next 45 minutes if I play my absolute best. You probably don't want to be thinking those thoughts in that moment. You want to be super prepared for that moment. So how does one get prepared for that moment? Well, if you want to get to the nuts and bolts, every single day for me, literally, I have a 5-year-old, so I'm up very early, begins around 4:30 or 5 a.m. with stick control. If you're familiar with this book, it's George Stone's. It's one of the most basic books in the whole percussion lexicon. Stick control, just playing the first page as even as possible. Fundamentals are really what I harp with my students. Anyone who comes to study with me at the Conservatory, no matter what you've done in high school, no matter how great of a snare drummer or marimba player or timpanist or hand drummer, drum set player, whatever, I break everyone back down to the bare bone fundamentals so that we all have a place to start from. The reason for that is because consistency is the hardest thing to find when you play percussion. You know, we all can have our good days. We can all say that sounded perfect in the practice room or in the parking lot or whatever. But when we get out there, how do we tap into that peak performance? So one of the biggest things that I've done that I think has really benefited my playing in the orchestra, a lot of my playing, as you hear, has to be very soft. You know, almost hilariously soft at times. I should take this moment. I want to thank Yamaha for this snare drum that we've designed together and you're hearing me play on, and Vic Firth for my signature sticks that they put out a few years ago, and Zildjian also for helping sponsor tonight. I have to play really soft a lot of the time in the orchestra, and so I'm going to sort of show you how I practice that, right? It sort of seems, you know, you just practice soft. I use a book of rudimental solos by a guy named John Pratt. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with these, the 14 modern contest solos. I'm going to show you how I practice it. So these are all really kind of, this is my cover from 1997, so that's why it looks like total tattered like that. I'll play one of these. This will be a little more accessible than the first two things I've played, and then I'll show you how I practice it soft. Okay, so. Okay, so that is what I would call, it's something I work with. I think I started playing those probably in 8th grade, 9th grade, but didn't really truly harness what capabilities there were inside of this for me to work on the other end of my playing. So these are fun to rip like that. It's just second nature to just throw this down. This is a little more accessible. You can feel we're one, right? So how do I practice this? Well, I should start by saying I always use a metronome when I practice snare drum or tambourine or basically anything except solo marimba. I mean, literally always. But I always use the metronome when I talk about stick control. I always use the metronome in a way where I'm in charge of the time. I don't put the metronome on, I put it on big beats like that. So it's always there. It's always, you always have to be on the metronome. You can't just sort of play how you feel. But it's not, there's no more training wheels, right? There's no more dictating, spoon-feeding the time to the entire time. You have to really internalize that time. So the two ways that helped me before even coming to this were obviously marching, playing in time, feeling that, the connection with the ground, and also playing drum set, which not a lot of people that are in my position have that background either. There are a lot of people that do what I do that played timpani in their youth orchestra and grew up exclusively on Brahms and Beethoven and Mozart, which is amazing repertoire, it's core repertoire. But for a percussionist, there's not a whole lot going on in those pieces. A lot of what I do involves snare drum, involves crazy mallet stuff. You know, a piece like Bolero, does anyone know this piece? You know, it's Ravel's repeated snare drum line over and over and over again. You know, I have to play this piece probably once or twice a season, and typically I have to start it almost inaudibly. So I'll play, here's the rhythm that you hear in the piece. And that goes on for, that can go on for like 12 or 13 minutes. So here's how it normally starts. And it will remain, it will remain at that dynamic for a very long time. So I skipped a step here. I wanted to show you the John Pratt here. This is how I practice the Pratt. Usually after my son goes to bed, we were talking about 9 to 11 o'clock is that magic time when you get everything done. This is when I usually practice and watch basketball at the same time. So check this out. This is that same piece, but I can play it at pianissimo. And this is the metronome on 15 beats a minute, which is, you know, 120 divided in half, divided in half, divided in half, right? I'm not sure if you can hear this. This is a new one. I will save you the entirety. So I know that's something very different than what we've been hearing all day, but really, I challenge you to practice your soft end of your playing. First of all, people typically, specifically in my line of work, people don't want you to be the world's loudest snare drum player. You get 0 points for doing that. I can tell you that for sure in my line of work. What they do want to hear is you be able to play something like this. This is called Drum Corps on Parade. It's the very first solo out of this book. What I tell students when they play something like this, when they play something like Bolero, even though you're playing almost inaudibly quiet, I want the character to feel like the parking lot warm-up session like 2 miles away you're hearing in the distance. So it's not someone walking on eggshells. Instead, you're hearing someone who's not afraid to play, but you're hearing it come through in this really sort of, I don't know what that was, an aggressive whisper or whatever that was I just did. You're hearing this, you know, really intense, focused, rhythmic sound, but it doesn't sound like someone who's just trying to play really quiet, right? So what I'm trying to show here is that the snare drum can be a very melodic instrument. It can be an instrument where we play, you know, I could play a spot from Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade. This is a little bit louder. The snare drum part here is fun, but what I'm trying to do is actually imitate the rest of the orchestra. So those of you who maybe know the piece, maybe you can hear the music as I play. So that is an example, yeah, it seems technically rather tame compared to probably a lot of the notes a lot of you played tonight. But musically, it's not the easiest thing in the world to play the snare drum with a sense of tone, to focus on things like touch and nuance when we play. The second thing I played, the more bizarre French etude, that gets asked on a lot of orchestral percussion auditions, mostly because you can get the sense of someone's idea of phrasing and how they can, play at different dynamic levels, subito dynamic levels, really challenging technical proficiency, but also doing it while sounding like it's no big deal, right? Not straining a whole bunch. I want to switch gears really quick, just because I got a request to do it and I brought it with me. One of my favorite instruments over time is an underrated instrument, an underdog in the world. This is the tambourine, right? So this is my custom-made tambourine by the Luft Mallet Company and Tambourine Company. You can check it out. We worked together on this with the shell and all the different metals for the jingles. And so I'm going to play a couple pieces of repertoire on the tambourine just to give you an idea of what the tambourine is capable of. We all know it can shake, we can play thumb rolls, and we can do it like in church, right? So I'm not going to be doing really any of that stuff today for you, but I'm going to show you a few different orchestral excerpts that utilize the tambourine in ways that you may not have known were necessary. The first thing I'll play is, you can probably hear the tune. It's from the Nutcracker. It's got a huge tambourine part right near the end. So I'll play one more for you here. This is España by Emmanuel Chabrier. So it's just a brief example of some of the possibilities on an instrument that I never really gave much thought to. I always kind of saw it sitting around, and instruments like the tambourine and the triangle and the suspended cymbal that we never practice ever in our entire lives, right? Until we have to play it, and oops, we sound really bad. These are instruments I play all the time in the orchestra, and so I got really into Brazilian pandeiro playing, if anyone's familiar with that. From samba, it's I'm not going to pretend to try and do that, but it's super hip. It's a different sort of rhythmic sensibility than we get from just da 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 chugga 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 chugga, right? It's very, you can't even transcribe the notes from it. You just have to listen to it. But what I took from it is that the tambourine is really a two-handed instrument, and I can make extreme phrases on this instrument too. You see, I'm using sort of a revised pandeiro technique to play faster rhythms all up rather than down on my knee. So last year, I had my sophomores, thanks, just improvising. I had a bunch of my sophomores pick different rappers that they wanted to transcribe and play all on the tambourine. And I had one student do a whole bunch of songs by Jid that was really one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. So music is music, I should say also. I teach jazz at the Conservatory, but also we have an American music program, which is all-encompassing of rock and roll, of hip-hop, of R&B, of bluegrass, of all different types. I wouldn't be up here today without my eclectic music background. Playing in the San Francisco Symphony, even in the last month, I've had to play the washboard, I'm not kidding. I've had to play, all different kinds of sound effects. Coming up in April, we play one of Mahler's, the 6th Symphony, where I climb up in the balcony and hit a huge box with a hammer. I play drum set. I play all different kinds of things. It all came from my start playing in the drum line way so many years ago, and just having a general curiosity about all different types of music. I never in a million years would have thought I would have played professionally in a symphony orchestra. And I can tell you for sure, I have, for me, my dream job. Don't take it for granted that I play music 6 days a week and teach music. It's possible to have a career doing this. I came from just trying to play super fast flam taps and get into the Colts in the summer of 1998 to being in the San Francisco Symphony, getting to see the world because of my music career. And I owe a lot of it to the work ethic that I got from this activity. Just learning how to do things over and over again. Some of that crazy metronome stuff that you saw me do with the snare drum here. I think we have time, and I'll take a few questions. I'm gonna show you one. We do have the xylophone here. I guess I'll play it. Is anyone familiar with the piece Porgy and Bess? A little bit? No? A couple takers? Okay. It is probably, we call it the national anthem for the xylophone for orchestra auditions. I'll give it a whirl here. So cool. Okay. So that is another example of the kind of piece you would get one chance to play, right? 30 people on a day of an audition, you get your one chance to play that, among other things. So how do I have that on total recall? I've practiced it tens of thousands of times, and that is not an exaggeration. So just an example for those of you who are working on, you really want your time to be impeccable, right? I mean, we do in drumline. We're all playing on the field without a metronome. We've got a drum major, but time is internalized. I practiced from, that was about it should have been about 128. So my practice is very simple. I would play it one time through. I'll use some practice mallets. If I nail it one time through, I will cut the tempo in half. So now it's half notes, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just gonna cut to the chase here. I'm gonna play it here. This is 16 beats a minute, which is absurd, but this is what I got from doing drumline so many years. So, I don't mean to do, probably not all that, I don't mean to do stupid human tricks up here, but what that really is, to me, that right there, if I can do that, I do not need to spend a half hour more practicing that over and over again. Do you understand? So this is kind of, we're talking, those of you who are really serious practicing, your marimba solo or your snare drum solo. By the way, April 8th, INE at Logan High School. You guys should all sign up. It's a great opportunity to play solos, get yourself out there and put yourself out here in front of everyone like this. It's the best opportunity to just play under pressure. Why am I doing this like this? Because you have to build confidence in your playing. I know a lot of you, especially when you're this age, you're waiting to be told if it's good enough. You're waiting to be told how to fix it. You're waiting to be told how to play it so often. And I think the biggest gift that I want to impart to my students by the time they graduate is that they can be their own teacher. Is that they don't, they get 1 hour with me out of 7 days of the week, right? The rest of the time, they're practicing hours and hours in the percussion studio. They're around their peers and the other students. They can't be with the teacher all the time. So you want to learn how to diagnose these problems. You want to learn, to me, a metronome and a mirror and a stick, pair of sticks and a practice pad, you can get a whole heck of a lot done just doing that. As long as you're aware of what you look like, what you want to sound like, it just comes down to consistency, consistent practice, being able to play something like this, something like that under pressure, doesn't just happen. It doesn't just happen by being talented. It may every once in a while, but when we talk about playing under pressure, you talk about getting out here in front of everyone, with your drum line, and you're playing everything from memory, right? And I told these guys I was sorry I had to bring a music stand out. I usually play everything from memory. To play one thing not from memory. I think just, like I said, something like I&E is a really good opportunity to just put yourself out there. You can't simulate that experience. You have to just play in front of other people. So for those of you, maybe if there's even 2 of you in this room who potentially want to be professional musicians, this is a great starting ground for you all. This is, I thought I was so behind when I got to music school because all I'd ever done was DCI and jazz band in high school. And it turned out it was actually the greatest asset I ever had. I didn't have any of these phobias in my head about Beethoven 9 or great pieces of music, but I just wasn't as familiar with them as I was with the Crossman 1991 show, or Star of Indiana's last show, right? I knew way more about that than I did about Mahler 1 through 9, for sure. And so I find I have 4 students currently out of our 13 at the Conservatory who went through the drum corps program, and they are thriving the most. They lead the way in how to practice, how to be the first one in the room, how to be good citizens, how to prop up your other colleagues, your other peers, your other classmates. This is such a great activity. I think almost all of you will have an opportunity to be successful in what you're doing because you learn how to work in a team and you learn how to build towards excellence. And so what I try to give to students, apart from the independence and the ability to teach themselves, is just to learn how to be excellent at something. You don't necessarily have to be a professional musician. Those of you who are really into this right now is the time to be really into it, to have this innocence about pursuing music. No one ever told me it was a dumb idea to be doing what I was doing. Statistically, there's not a lot of kids from Iowa that try to make it in the symphony orchestra, but I was just going, I think it's great, all the parents I see that are here, all the teachers, a huge round of applause for all of you for making this happen. Your support is really what makes this happen for everybody. Because I know these are long days, and I remember my Saturdays evaporating all through high school doing this too, and so kudos to all of you for being here, for getting your students here, and really just a huge thanks for letting me be here with you all tonight. Thank you to Lane, thank you to NCPA, thank you to everyone for the opportunity to be here. Thank you Yamaha, Vic Firth, Zildjian, Luft, the San Francisco Symphony. I hope to see some of you. If you ever come to the Symphony, don't be shy. We are probably the most approachable section in the orchestra. If you want to come up to the stage and say, hey, I saw you at American Canyon, please do. I'm not one of those that's, no, I'm the opposite. I came from playing in the gym on Saturday night, so I get it. So thank you so much for having me here, and I really appreciate it.